Blessed to be with you. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Don't forget, coming up this week, we're going to be at Nampa Christian High School, promote our school, secure our future. Brought to you by CapEd Credit Union and Team Mazda Subaru. Joining us now, Lars Larson. Lars Larson Show, larslarson.com. We're just a couple weeks away from seeing Lars in Washington. Lars, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing, Kevin?
You know, it's funny. That's about the only time I see you. You're in Oregon and I'm in Idaho, but we meet in Washington, D.C.
That's right, for Feet to the Fire. Yeah. And what a great time to do it, because we'll be just a short distance away from where, in the state of Maryland, they're watching rape after rape after rape take place involving illegal aliens. I think they had 6 of them in a 1-month period in one county, Montgomery County, all involving illegal alien suspects. And now they have the charges that have come down against members of an MS-13 gang for stabbing a man to death. And all 6 of the suspects in that case are not only illegal aliens, but also MS-13 gang members. So, and then you have politicians in those counties who say, we're not going to do anything about it, even though they could pick up the phone the next time one of these illegals is in custody and call the folks over at ICE, and ICE would be happy to remove them from the country.
That will be one thing that we'll probably be continuing to talk about, not only us, but Congress and the president. Now, Lars, before we get rolling, we had a gentleman by the name of Doug from Mountain Home called in the 6 o'clock hour and said, you tell that Lars Larson, he did an interview with a Parkland parent. You need to get the name of that book and all this. And I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. He listens to your show all the time and was riveted by that interview.
Well, I'll tell you, I was as well. And in fact, the man, Andrew Pollack, has now moved to the Pacific Northwest. He said he couldn't take it in Broward County anymore. And it wasn't just the memory of his daughter, Meadow, who was shot 9 times at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High in Parkland, Florida. You'll remember that we're coming up on the 2-year anniversary of that. And the shooting was unnecessary. He pointed out some things to me. I was aware that the killer in that case was a student who was not allowed to come to school with a backpack because the school viewed him as a threat. What I didn't know was he was frisked every day when he came to school. So imagine a school that knows a student is a big enough risk that he is frisked every time he comes into the school, that he's not allowed to carry a bag because he had brought knives to school, he'd brought bullets to school. He didn't bring a gun to school until the day that he murdered 17 people. But they knew that he was a problem. And the local sheriff's department, run by Scott Israel, who finally got fired only when Florida elected a Republican governor, the Democrat governor before him would not fire Scott Israel. He's the one who had the Broward's cowards deputies who stood outside the school, a couple of them, and didn't go inside while children were being murdered out of cowardice or out of what, I don't know. And so he said he couldn't take it anymore. The school knew there was a problem. They failed to call law enforcement on any of the many occasions when this killer, accused killer, made threats to kill fellow students before the day that he came with a gun and murdered students. The sheriff's department had come to his house 40 times, and we don't know what the complaints were because they never filed a single piece of paperwork. So were they coming on noise complaints? We do know that he punched his mother's teeth in and didn't get charged with a crime for doing that. So there were multiple opportunities for the schools to take action, to refer it to law enforcement. There were multiple options for law enforcement to take action, saying we keep getting called to this kid's house. And when they don't write up paperwork, there's no way to find out why were they at the house. But if you told somebody the cops had come to a person's house 40 times in Boise, would you say, well, what was going on? And the reasonable answer would be usually the police come to reports of somebody in peril. And I suspect that's what was going on. This kid was violent for a long time, but the school didn't want to talk about it because it made their arrest numbers look better. In fact, Robert Runcie, the superintendent of the district, bragged about how police actions against students had dropped by 79% under his tenure. Well, crime drops when you just don't report it. If you stop reporting crimes, you could get Boise's crime rate to 0. Just don't report any crimes or don't take any action when the police find crimes. So He said, I got to get out of here. And there are ways to address this problem, ways that do not take an act of Congress or an act of the state legislature. And I think the ways are to take this seriously. But the problem is, and I don't know if Boise schools suffer from this or not, but there is a program. It goes under different names. In Florida, it was the Promise Program. In parts of the Northwest, it's called Restorative Justice. And what they say is when a kid threatens to kill one of his fellow students, and a credible threat to kill somebody is a crime in every community in America. If you don't believe me, look up the laws. It is a crime to make a credible threat to hurt or kill someone. And so they have the ability to act. But under restorative justice, the schools, who are not experts in criminal justice, they're not experts in rehabilitation of criminals or changing criminals' minds, they say we don't want to take any action because if we do, then the schools, you'll hear, well, such and such a high school had the cops come and arrest students 50 times last year, and that would tell you there's a problem. So they just don't report it, and they have you sit down in a circle and say, gosh, I'm really sorry that I threatened to kill you. And this kind of ridiculous restorative justice stuff is going on in schools all over America. Like I said, I don't know for a fact in Boise, but even in my neck of the woods in Vancouver, Washington, I've talked to school resource officers who are told if you catch a kid who's assaulted another kid, if it's not a serious enough assault that the kid goes to the hospital, we're just not going to report it.
Right.
And it makes the school officials look good until everybody finds out that the end result can be 17 dead bodies.
Right. When I was in Pittsburgh, we exposed a principal that actually they had drugs going on, assaults going on, and she never reported everything. Of course, she attacked the media, and she was removed from office. But it is troubling where we just kind of push everything to the side and hope these bad things and bad people will go away.
Oh, I hope. It would be interesting to find out, to get an affirmative statement from the Boise schools to say, are you practicing any form of this restorative justice? Meaning, if a crime is committed in your schools, since you're not in a little bubble where the laws of the city of Boise and the laws of the state of Idaho do not apply, do you call the police? And if you don't call the police, who's going to correct that criminal's actions? And I know that it makes some people uncomfortable that a 17-year-old who punches somebody out has committed a crime. But if you say, well, at 17 he hasn't committed a crime, and you've been letting him get away with it since he was 14, what do you think he's going to do in the community when he's out of school and he's 18? Having been taught by the system, by the schools and by the police, that when you beat somebody up, you face no criminal sanctions at all, what do you suppose he's going to do to the bigger community when he's out of the school? And my suspicion is that if you teach a kid it's okay to beat people up, he's going to keep on beating people up.
Lars Larson joining us, Lars Larson Show, LarsLarson.com, Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. So over the weekend, we had the usual suspects in Manchester, New Hampshire, proclaiming how they're going to be the next president of the United States. Is anybody popping for you, Lars?
Well, no. Popping as a talk show topic, sure. Bernie Sanders gives me stuff every day, like when he announced last week in response to a question that he thought that funding abortion in poor countries was a way to address the climate crisis. Because if you kill enough babies, then you don't need as much fuel or food or anything else. So he's suggesting abortion as a way to help address the climate crisis, not just funding it here, but having American taxpayers pay to kill babies overseas. Now, I'm against killing unborn babies, period, but Bernie Sanders apparently thinks it's part of the solution. I guess you could call it a modest proposal, if you remember that old essay from a couple hundred years ago, where they, I think it was, and I haven't read it in a long time, it is where they said this writer suggested satirically that if the British really wanted to solve the problem of poverty in Northern Ireland, that maybe eating babies was serving up for dinner. And he was doing it as a way of making fun of the ineffectual nature of government to address a problem. Or you could call it the final solution because, of course, there was a guy in the 40s who tried that too, famously. But Bernie Sanders is out there doing that. And this is a guy who has made a lot of money, and he has been in public office for most of his adult life. He is a multimillionaire. He has 3 houses, and yet he says it's evil to be rich. Now
Lars,
figure that one out. He's God's gift to talk radio.
He is.
And so is Elizabeth Warren.
Right. Lars Larson joining us. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. So, again, thanks to our friends at FAIR. We're going to be there in Washington, D.C. in a couple weeks, and we're right next to Capitol Hill. Lars, you always hit the ground running. You're doing not one but two shows plus everything else. Congress starting today, what do you think they're going to do? Take your guns or
Nothing. Well, I think they'll talk a lot about guns, but ultimately I keep asking my friends in politics, because I do have friends there. I've never aspired to be there myself, but I've said to them, so the House is going to pass a bill. Then they're going to press on Mitch McConnell to put it through the Senate and get a majority of votes in the Senate, which I don't think is possible. And McConnell's already said, I'm not going to mess with a bill that the president isn't going to sign. And the president has been stalwart in his defense of the Second Amendment. And I think even though he bobbled a bit about a month ago when he began to, he mentioned, maybe we should have universal background checks and this and that and the other thing, in response to incidents like the shooting in Odessa, Texas. Let's tell your audience, if you haven't already, what they've already learned about the Odessa killer. He bought a gun that had been manufactured illegally, and he bought it illegally. Now, what would universal background checks have done about catching somebody who's already breaking the law in obtaining the firearm that he used to do those killings? And I don't think it would do anything, because the secret that a lot of liberals and even some conservatives don't seem to have figured out is that criminals don't follow the law. So I don't know what good it would do to do these things. The other thing it would do is, Kevin, I happen to live in Washington State, and I'm under universal background checks right now. Do you know that if a young female member of my family, not my daughter, not my son, but if any other female member, let's say one of Tina's sisters, says, hey, my boyfriend is showing up at my house, I'm afraid he's going to hurt or kill me, can Lars loan me a pistol? The answer is no, I can't, because I would have to take that person down to an FFL dealer, run the whole transaction, just loaning a pistol, which I could have done a few years ago before the law, and then get it back at some point. We would have to run it through a background check, pay a fee, and get approval not just from the federal government and the National Instant Check System, but also from the local police department, that I can transfer the gun to her. And I know people listening to this in Boise may be saying, well, what, just to loan somebody a pistol? You could just loan it to them. Nobody will know. I can't, because if I ever loan a pistol or a rifle to anyone without going through the background check process, I'm guilty of a crime. And if they catch me and convict me, I lose my gun rights forever. So that's where we are. It complicates all kinds of things. It means I can't loan a shot. If a friend called me up, a friend of 20 years that I know well, calls me up and says, hey, I'm going duck hunting, but I don't have a shotgun, or my shotgun isn't doing well, can I borrow yours? I can't loan it to him without going through the background check to transfer it to him for a weekend. And then when he comes back, we have to go back to the gun store and pay another fee and go through the background check again to return it. That's how ridiculous the universal background checks would make things. Now, I know there are people who say, well, then you shouldn't be loaning guns. Look, the fact is that when you take a look at the guns that have been used to commit mass murder in the last 20 years, some of them were obtained legally by people who bought them because they had no criminal background check and no mental problem. Odessa was bought illegally because the man had a mental health issue, and it had been documented by the system, and he couldn't buy one legally. He had tried 5 years ago, so he bought one illegally. And then there have been guns that were stolen. The gun that was used to shoot up Clackamas Town Center in Oregon was stolen from its owner. Adam Lanza, who got his gun, and some of the media are now writing stories saying that that's the Sandy Hook in Newtown, Connecticut, the school shooting, that his mother gave him the gun. Well, I guess if you're thinking very broadly, you could say she gave him the gun because he put a bullet in her head, and then she offered him the gun after she was dead. So I guess you could say she gave up the gun after she was dead. But other than that, is and you see stories now where truth is being rewritten by the media to say his mother gave him the gun. No, he killed his mother and took the gun. So how are universal background checks going to change things when many of the killers have obtained the guns after having gone through a background check and they passed? many of the killers steal their guns, and so those are the ways that criminals obtain guns. They tend not to go to the gun store. So I don't think universal background checks are going to go anywhere. Although I know this has been kind of a downer conversation, but I want to both make some of your audience members envious and brag a bit. This weekend I went archery hunting. I like bow hunting with a friend of mine. And so I went out Friday night and Saturday morning, got up early, right before sunrise, got out in position and was waiting. And a nice-looking buck walked in. Actually, 4 bucks walked in, but one really stood out. And he was still in velvet, which means he's got the fuzzy stuff on his antlers, for those of you who don't hunt. And
all right, Lars.
I managed to plug him with a bow.
Impressive. We're short on time. Lars Larson, thank you, brother.
You bet. Take care, Kevin. See you in D.C.
Yes, sir. Our great friend Lars Larson. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Our time is 8:25. Tom in Nampa, thank you for your patience. Good morning.
Good morning. Two things. You were talking about how the schools need to, take a more active role in monitoring students. Okay, fine, true enough. The flip side of that is you get these schools with zero tolerance policies. Suspended I think it was a 5th grader because she had a plastic knife in her lunch to spread jelly on her sandwich. Another one was 3rd grade, and she had a little rubber soccer ball size of a ping pong on the end of a chain. It was a little bling to put on her backpack. And they suspended her because it could be used as a weapon. Excuse me? So you got ridiculousness on both ends of the spectrum. And you might want to call Lars about his bow hunting. There's been talk of limiting the number of arrows you can hold in your quiver to 10. Because nobody needs to, civilians don't need to have more than 10 arrows in their quiver. And they don't need to have a bow with a pull of more than 75 pounds. Otherwise, it's an assault bow, and that only belongs in the military. And, the legislation about spears and swords.
Right.
Oh, don't get me started on that.
Thank you, Tom.
Really.
Appreciate it. The publisher of the Gem State Patriot, Tea Party Robert, joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. Back from the lower 48, having a pretty good time. Not happy about the rain we're having today, though.
Well, are you ever happy?
Yes. Anytime I'm talking to you.
Great.
I took some time to do some homework for you on these e-scooters. So while there's no national data on scooter crashes doesn't currently exist, Consumer Reports sent requests to 60 medical facilities. 23 responded with information that they treated 1,545 patients for scooter-related injuries over the past year. Now, mind you, this is just a small sampling, so if you really want to take a look at it in perspective, think about how many medical facilities there are in this country and how many have not responded. The other thing you need to look at is a Portland study that basically found e-scooter injury rate to be 2.2 accidents per 10,000, much higher than the national average for motorbikes and cars. So although we could not find any current data on the injuries to non-motorized scooters that children use, if you go back and take a look at what kind of injuries they caused in the late and early 1990s, there were between 100 and 200,000 injuries per year. So while everybody thinks that these things are safe, these accidents have been coming down in recent years, but that's attributed to increased safety gear. So while I hate more government regulation, riding these vehicles on crowded city streets and sidewalks, it would just seem we are asking for trouble. My suggestion is if you're going to ride where there's less chance of getting injured and wear some safety gear.
Well, and by the way, for people just tuning in, we were talking about that last hour, but here's the other thing about these scooters. Now, you're always on me about being a fatty.
Yes, I am, and that's, I have all about exercise.
Why are we empowering people not to exercise. Now, maybe you're right. Maybe it's non-motorized scooters, but do we really need, and I'm not talking about a law to ban these things, but is it really necessary? Is it really necessary to have something that goes 10 to 15 miles an hour on a sidewalk?
No, but it's a way for another company to make money. It's a way for the politicians to get a company in there. They're going to get campaign contributions from them. I guarantee you that. Look, everything is dollar-oriented nowadays. You and I know that. But when are the people going to finally figure that out? Politicians do things because not just because they make sense, but because they make sense to them. I don't see, well, I'm not going to go on with this. I see them riding down there. I just bought 2 e-bikes for my wife and I. The first thing we got were helmets. So that'll give you my answer to the question. But on this subject of boys and men and the availability of those mature enough to take on the responsibility of marriage, I find that while there are many young men who have never been exposed to hard work or responsibility.
Well, there are a lot of little boys. I don't think they're young men anymore, except those in the military. But you got a lot of little boys.
Well, in most cases, they're not mature enough to handle marriage, and there's still pretty good selection of them out there. And you can ask my 3 granddaughters, but they're going to tell you that you have to be pretty picky nowadays if you're going to choose a mate. And they're pretty picky. And thanks for having Lars on this morning. This guy really makes sense that the problems we have with guns are the criminals are not going to get them, are going to get them regardless of the laws we implement, because the criminals don't obey the laws. So
that's why they're criminals.
Exactly.
All right.
When are the politicians going to learn this?
Tea Party Bob, publisher of the Gem State Patriot. We appreciate you, brother.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Have a good day.
And you. Coming up next, a lot going on here. Phone number is 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Finally, we'll talk about Kamala Harris, who wants to get rid of the death penalty, wants to end cash money bail, and she wants to keep track of the police. Well, who's going to keep track of her? Maybe that's what we'll do. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Thank you, Ray and Maya. I'll miss that. Good morning, Dave. Rolling on the right side. So here we go. People are going to school and having a good time and everything else. And you remember when you went to school, first day of school, as you got older, it really mattered what you wore, right? Really mattered what you wore. And, everybody wanted, and maybe it's this way today, name brands really meant a lot. Now, millennials who are now parents, they were the first ones to really not be down with the whole idea of name brands, whether it was Izod or Ralph Lauren or something of that nature, right? The older we get, hopefully that doesn't matter. But there's a story that just really makes you feel good about people and life. Maybe you've seen this story on social media, and it comes from the South. You have a little boy. I know we've been talking about little boys all day long, but this was a real little boy. This wasn't a kid who's, in his late 20s, early 30s, addicted to video games, but a Florida student, little kid, elementary school. He was so obsessed with his favorite team. His favorite team was the University of Tennessee, and he wanted to represent the Volunteers during his elementary school's College Colors Day. Now, you see that with people wearing their Bronco stuff or their College of Idaho stuff or their favorite college team, maybe their Vandal stuff. So the kid didn't own any apparel, so he took matters into his own hands. He grabbed and drew on a piece of paper the University of Tennessee's logo, which is UT, and pinned it to an orange T-shirt. He was so fired up, ready to go, that he wore it to school. He took it one step further to make his own label. But you had a lot of people that decided to make fun of the little boy, particularly girls. Now, you've seen that movie Mean Girls and stuff, right? Well, the Mean Girls got a hold of the little boy, right? And they were upset with the little boy. Now, what parent cannot relate to this, right? What parent cannot relate to this when you see your child come home and their feelings are hurt because of bullying or making fun of? In our day, they just made fun of you and you went out into the parking lot and you figured it out, right? Not so much anymore. So some girls at the lunch table next to his, now they didn't even care about College Day, but they made fun of his sign, and the little boy was devastated. Well, the folks at the University of Tennessee decided to make a big deal out of it. They found this out on social media, and the teacher was going to actually buy him a Tennessee t-shirt. So the folks at the University of Tennessee found out, so they sent him a big package and said, "Go Vols," probably with Rocky Top, which is the song at the University of Tennessee, playing over and over and over again, including a jersey. By the way, the University of Tennessee, they're turning his UT design into an official shirt. I can't wait to get one. The proceeds will go to an anti-bullying foundation. Can you believe that? Now, again, I'm sure people will buy this. It'll be sold out. But that's the good news that's going on. And it's so refreshing when you have an organization, and, you know, we can go back and forth about college football and everything else that makes the difference in the lives of a little boy. And by the way, it is crazy that you have people that are just mean-spirited. But, again, a major institution doing the right thing. Over the weekend, we had the usual cast of characters of Democratic presidential candidates. They were appearing in a place east of the Great River called Manchester, New Hampshire. That's right, Manchester, New Hampshire, along with Iowa, the first in the nation states where people get to vote, have a good time, and have the opportunity to make their case on why they should be the president of the United States. We'll hear from them coming up. By the way, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, you have Kamala Harris, right? She wants to end a lot of things, including the death penalty. Now, I don't know if the country has changed enough. And by the way, the death penalty is controversial. We have the Idaho Innocence Project. We have all these other issues. But Kamala Harris has unveiled a sweeping criminal justice reform plan that would get rid of the death penalty and cash bail, among other changes. By the way, it is my opinion that the legal system is not racist. The legal system is the cash money business. If you can afford an attorney then that knows the judges and that are going to cut these guys' breaks, then chances are you're going to be good to go. But if you have a public defender, God bless their souls, who's outgunned by the prosecution, look at Timmy Kenner. Look at Timmy Kenner. Now, I don't know if his attorneys are public defenders, if they're doing it pro bono, but they've already got, because he's been ruled mentally incompetent, Kenner is the man accused of killing that little 3-year-old girl, stabbing her to death, stabbing people multiple times, and is in jail, wanted to change his name to Love One Another or something ridiculous like that, right? But because of our legal system, Kenner, not even a death penalty case, because he's been ruled too incompetent to stand trial. What about that, Kamala Harris? The California senator says that the death penalty is immoral and a gross negligence and misuse of taxpayer dollars. Are you telling me that if you stab somebody to death, a 3-year-old little girl, you don't deserve the death penalty, Kamala Harris? Harris's plan would also do away with private prisons, solitary confinement, and incarcerating juveniles in adult prisons. It would also take steps to reduce the use of deadly force by police officers and legalize marijuana nationwide. I can't even think of a song that would go along with this, right? Harris will be one of 9 candidates taking part in the big Democratic primary debate Thursday night on ABC. Does anybody really agree with this stupid plan? Except legalization of marijuana. Hey, Kevin, how about a toke? And we're talking about other changes we would make to the prison system. The prison system is a challenge. We'll talk a little bit about that. Maybe you watched Lester Holt over the weekend. I'm in Angola, and instead of talking about the crime and punishment, he talked about the number of people that are minorities in prison. Again, my thought is this: it is not a racial problem. It is a problem involving a problem involving money. If you have the big money, you roll. If you don't, well, you're going to do your time. Money changes everything. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And speaking of which, over the weekend, we had major Democratic presidential candidates talking about how they would make America better. Here's a thought. You remember how anti-police President Obama was? Can you tell me that Kamala Harris is going to love officers of law enforcement?
We have to remember that it's our job to say to them, no. You give me free health care, you give me a good education, and give me a fair shot. I'll create my own damn career.
That is Marianne Williams, a mainstream Democratic presidential candidate. Thankfully, we have the voice of reason, Bernie Sanders.
Under our administration, we will end the international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a human right.
More on that in a minute. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. So is it time to blow up the criminal justice system? Heady thoughts before Glenn Beck. Kamala Harris, what say you?
He made all kinds of promises. He said he was going to keep folks safe. Well, I'm going to tell you, I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee. I serve on the Senate Homeland Security Committee. I meet on a regular basis with members of the American intelligence community. This guy's got us one tweet away from war.
Sherlock in Napa with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Sherlock.
Oh, good morning, Kevin. You know, those are beautiful teasers that you do put in there.
Thank you. I'm trying.
But the key of it all is the differentiation between judicial justice and legal justice. As the, shall we say, bloviating lady was talking about criminal justice, there is two different and definite jurisdictions. And judicial justice compared to legal criminal justice. We will, as I mentioned probably at some length of time ago, we're going to have a cup of coffee and a donut. Maybe 2 donuts.
Maybe.
And it would be most interesting to know the differentiation between the two.
Between 1 and 2 donuts?
No. I'll give you another one.
That was where my mind was going, to the donuts.
Between judicial justice and legal.
Well, do you agree with my statement that the criminal justice system isn't racist? It's just about money. If you have money, then you get the good attorneys and you get out. If you don't have money, well, then you're in the poke with the crew.
You are exactly correct. Let me put it another. There's a difference, and you're right. But it's the difference between being in the lake or at the lake.
Wow.
It's that simple. And you're absolutely correct. If you have the money in the legal criminal justice system, you are paying for at-law attorneys. And when I say that, it's the differentiation between at the lake or in the lake.
Well, maybe you should tell Kamala Harris that.
Oh, we can do that. But nevertheless, I just thought I'd mention that because you are very accurate. You hire an attorney, you are in the deep swamp because you are within that jurisdiction. My apologies if I'm being taking too much time.
No, I appreciate it, Sherlock. Thank you for the call. Appreciate you, brother.
You're welcome.
580-5436, 580-KIDO.
We
are going to work on this together. Democrats, independents, Republicans, before we are any of those things, we are Americans and we are human beings first. And we're going to start treating one another in that way. Show up everywhere, for everyone, write no one out.
Now, wait a minute. Didn't this guy apologize for being a white male? You can't have it both ways, Beto.
Take no one for granted. Count everyone in. That's how we defeat Donald Trump, and that's how we bring this great divided
Now, doesn't he sound like a young Bernie Sanders?
country back together again.
What about just talking like the people? Bernie, what say you?
Together we are going not only to
Can you hear it? Beto and Bernie sound alike together. It's kind of like that Sesame Street song where they're all singing along, right?
win this election, but together we are going to build an unprecedented grassroots movement. Trump wants to divide us up. We're going to bring our people together.
580-5436, 580-KIDO. Coming up next, more of the usual suspects. But first, let's get you to work safely and on time. Good morning, Dave.
Every Democrat running for president and every Democrat sitting in the seats in front of me is more qualified and more decent and more patriotic than the criminal who resides in the White House of the United States.
Now, didn't Beto just moments ago, didn't he just say that we all should get along? We're one America, we're one family, we're all this. And then all of a sudden you have Tom Steyer, the big-time billionaire, saying that there's a criminal in the Oval Office. I don't know about you, but you go back to 2008. Didn't former President Obama get elected because he was happy Obama? I mean, he was happy. It was hope. It was change. It was yes, we can, and everything else. Unfortunately, you've got a bunch of angry Democrats. Here's the governor of Montana. Why? No one else will put him on. Let's take a listen.
Remember how united the country actually felt in those days after 9/11. We need that same kind of purpose, compassion, and unity to come together, to bridge the deep division.
Right, he's talking about compassion and unity, and you have, Bernie and Tom Steyer and Beto talking about a criminal in the Oval Office. What about respect? Is that asking too much? How about some respect?
Solve that greatest challenge of our time.
The greatest challenge of our time, that's right. Climate change. Just like World War II, climate change. We've got, I don't know what you would call the warming of the environment, the warming of the climate. In World War II, it was the Nazis, it was the Japanese, it was the Axis. What do we call it today? Is the high humidity trying to kill us? What else is trying to take us down, right? Really, you think about this. We had people, the friendly showers, the wind, the hurricanes, are they colluding against us? Heady topics. Thankfully, Glenn Beck is next. He'll continue on the talk all day long. Ray Amaya, great job as always. Thank you, everyone, for listening. We so appreciate you. God bless and keep the faith.